The war on Gaza has left many questioning the very narratives they grew up hearing and believing. So how have recent events reshaped perceptions globally? And what are the likely consequences of many young people no longer drinking the Kool-Aid? I'm Myriam Francois, and this is The Stream.
I didn't realize the extent to how corrupt the mainstream media is.
You mean the children growing up doing active shooter drills don't like mass murder? Imagine that.
It's our responsibility to make sure that future generations are not lied to.
We are literally the next generation that they are scared of.
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
Whether it's growing distrust of mainstream media or newfound skepticism of what Western democracy and free speech represent, recent events have shifted US public opinion, not least in the consensus on unconditional support for Israel. So is the war on Gaza transforming perceptions among the next generation? And might this bring about any long-term reforms? To discuss this change, I'll be speaking to 3 content creators and online activists in America who've been using their social media platforms to educate others on Palestine. George Lee, who focuses on the intersection of media, socio-political issues, and popular culture. Allie O Brien uses her platform to shed light on a wide range of social topics. And Yeganeh Mafaher from Gen Z for Change, a collective of young activists who use online platforms to effect positive social change. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. Yeganeh, you have long been vocal on Palestinian rights, but I'm guessing that your content around this issue hasn't always had the reception that it has currently. Have you seen a shift in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's almost funny. Sometimes my videos from like 2 years ago will go viral now, and someone will comment like, wow, this just happened. And they don't realize that, we've been making content about this for years, and how, usually it got pushed under the rug, or it kind of stayed within the community of Middle Eastern people that talk about it. Not to say there weren't other people, but the views were never as much as it is now. And it's skyrocketing how open the young generation is to understanding information and, going back and even watching those old videos and understanding history as well.
And Allie, a lot of your content is focused on current affairs. Have you noticed a change in what content people are hungry for right now?
Yeah, I think partially. I mean, I've always been a political content creator, so I think the main shift for me has just been people expecting me to talk about Palestine. But I have noticed that more than ever, there's like hope and expectations in people's comment sections that even non-political content creators will be talking about Palestine. So makeup content creators, lifestyle creators, travel creators, there's this broader expectation that everybody with a platform will use it for good. And I would also say people are really interested in learning about history, because obviously in America, we learn an interesting rendition of history. And so people are learning about the Vietnam War protests and the Kent Massacre and the anti-apartheid boycotts of past generations to sort of inform what's happening today. And there's a much larger interest in history, I would say, from Gen Z right now than I've ever seen before.
And George, you were invited to the State of Union address at the White House recently. Did you notice any shift in consciousness there?
Yeah, it was a shift of consciousness, mainly from the White House and them being just real and transparent about how the average American don't really trust mainstream news, don't really trust mainstream media, and that they get their average, news from a TikToker or from a For You page. So for me, the shift in consciousness that I was able to acknowledge is that the White House administration was already recognizing the influence of people being able to mobilize and people being able to really formulate some amazing messages on social media that would impact how we view how the politics, how the policymakers and the politics, move.
Well, it has certainly been a noticeable shift in some spaces. Look at this.
Palestinians live a life of checkpoints, roadblocks, and giant walls built and enforced by a foreign military.
But hold on, the U.S. isn't all sunshine and roses either. Not only are we facing an affordable housing crisis, climate injustice, but also a lack of access to basic social services like healthcare. Because instead of our tax dollars being funneled back into our communities,
they're being sent here. The U.S. sends Israel billions of dollars to fund the death, displacement, and destruction of Palestinians all across occupied Palestine. Even the tear gas canisters that Israeli soldiers shoot at Palestinians are made in the U.S.
It is wild to think about how our government policies affect the rest of the world. And I know you're thinking, what can I even do?
Well, to start with, understand that our fates are tied. So go learn about what your government is doing with your money. And you'll realize that fighting for Palestinian liberation is also fighting for your own.
George, I see you smiling there. We have, of course, seen mass international movements previously, the Me Too movement, the BLM movement, the climate change movement. But is there something different happening right now? Or are we seeing maybe a sense of momentum built off previous struggles, maybe?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think that when we recognize what's been going on in America since Trayvon Martin, I think that a lot of young people has already been attuned to how dollars get spent to make it where folks get brutalized. The thing that happened was during October 7th is I think that a lot of us were able to connect the dots and seeing that when you train an Israeli soldier in Gaza to beat up on, you feel me, some Palestinian, you're going to send those same tactics here to America to beat up on Black Americans. And I feel like what happened was there was a spillover effect from a lot of folks being sick and tired of being sick and tired in 2020, being sick and tired of being sick and tired of really seeing people get their ass whooped on TV, seeing through their phone. And then once we were able to acknowledge that the Zionists also, you feel me, tied into the genocide that's going on in Congo and tied into the genocide that's going on in Tigray, and it made it where a lot of us started to connect those dots. So now we're not just viewing it in terms of domestic issues. Now we're seeing what's going on in the international geopolitical thing. And we're seeing that there is a consistency, a settler colonial violence of light over dark, white over black, and somehow people with dark pigment skin always being viewed as thugs and criminals and terrorists. Sound familiar?
Well, Yeganeh, I see you nodding your head there. As part of Gen Z for Change, you were involved in campaigns using formal routes for change, emailing representatives and such like. Can you tell us a bit about those actions and how maybe their failure to translate into policy has affected you and others?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just wanted to say I completely agree with what was said prior. And I think our cops, back home being trained by IDF soldiers, people are just opening their eyes so much to the way everything is connected, the prison systems, mass incarceration, everything is connected. It's not happening in a vacuum just in the United States or in Israel or anywhere else in the world where human rights are being questioned. When it comes to Gen Z for Change, we did create a tool where, every time you open Instagram, it sends an email to your representative. Every time, even if you open Tinder, let's say, you want to be like extra spicy with it, it'll email your representative. And we got, hundreds of thousands, if not, I'd have to check, over 1 million emails sent. And at the end of the day, what's happened? Photo ops have happened. Biden's made some Instagram posts with AOC. We haven't really seen many things happen. And I think that's what's also led to many students, making these encampments and being so brave, being suspended, being brutalized by the police, professors, all of these people. If this was just a week of genocide, maybe we wouldn't be doing this, but it's been months and people are tired and they're seeing that their voices aren't heard when they're giving these phone calls and they're being put on hold. Their emails aren't being answered. So people are very tired.
And well, Allie, on that point of kind of connecting the dots and this sort of wider awakening off the back of what's happening in Palestine, what are some of the trends that you're noticing?
Yeah, I think pretty immediately after discussions of Palestine became pretty mainstream on TikTok, I would sort of echo what everyone else has been saying. There was a lot of discussion of like cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. People started learning about displacement in Sudan. People started talking about the political and economic turmoil in Haiti. There is sort of this interest in learning about how everything is always connected. Like everyone has been saying, there's this trend towards connecting the dots where people, and I think some of this is just intrinsic to how social media works. Like anytime there's a trend, right? Like, the TikTok Riz party trended recently and automatically everyone was really interested in like, oh my gosh, what's the guy with the blue tie thinking? What's the guy with the white tie thinking? Like there's this almost fun and culture of like really analyzing everything from every perspective on social media. And that goes for international news as well. So people started learning about Palestine and they said, oh my gosh, how many different Palestinians with different experiences? Like, let me hear from disabled Palestinians, let me hear from queer Palestinians. Like, people really want the whole story. And people started to realize that the whole story was connected to other countries as well.
Well, this young woman raises an important point about the ways much of the so-called current awakening involves white people acknowledging things people of color have been saying, well, for a long time.
I remember learning about this a couple of years ago and being shocked and confused that we, as a world power, were not only allowing this, we were supporting it, we were funding it. We were funding Israel, as we are still to this day. And as is always the case, the creators of color I follow were immediately like, why are you shocked? Why are you confused? We've been thinking about this. We've been speaking about this for years. The United States has been doing this the world over for years and years and years, over and over and over again. Why are you shocked? Why are you confused?
George, is this just white people waking up to the reality of people of color?
I mean, sadly, in many different instances, yeah. Sadly, what we can recognize is that there's been a concerted manufacturing of narratives that is usually obscuring people of color's narratives and talking about the reality of how we are oppressed. What happened when George Floyd was murdered is the rest of the world got to see that 8 minutes and some seconds of that foot on their neck. You feel me? That's due to the blood, sweat, and tears of the Congolese people being able to give us these phones. But I think what happened was the Palestinians now are able to tell their own narrative. Now we don't get to hear about the slaughtering of the deer from the lion through the eyes of the lion. What happened was now we get to see bodies on the ground. We get to see children, parents picking up limbs. You feel me? We get to see buildings being blown up. You know what I'm saying? We get to see, you feel me, mass graves being aroused. It reminds me of Cat Williams, I'm saying, a comedian in the States, had went popular a whole bunch of years ago talking about the insurgents that's going on in Iraq. And one thing that he did in that comedy is talked about the different power in terms of they tricked us in America in trying to go get insurgents, but they are wearing, you feel me, sweatpants and t-shirts, and they got people that's going after them that has top-notch military gear on. When we seeing this right now, we see Hamas is a 12-year-old child. It's like, that's what you telling us we scared of? Ah, man, you done messed up. So when we come back to the white thing, it's like, yeah, in many instances, it's what people of color been saying for a long time. But what happened was now the connecting of the dots happened in a way that I think that like the cat can't be put back in the bag, the genie ain't going back in the bottle. Now it's too much we've seen now, you feel me? And for us in America, as a Black American, to know that the way that we get our ass whooped in America is perfected by how you beat up on Palestinians, your surveillance, and how you get data from us, and how you surveil us in the hood is what you're doing over in Gaza and in the West Bank, and make it just hit different. That's how we said in the hood, it hit different. You feel me?
Yeah. Well, one area which has seen a lot of commentary online is in the area of institutional hypocrisy. In particular, the UN has been denounced by many for failing to uphold the international standards it says it represents. This is nothing new, of course, but for some, the implications might be. Check this out.
And let's talk about the United Nations. They are nothing but a member club, like a country club, for the military superpowers of the world and their friends. How much do we really need them? 138 out of 193 countries inside the United Nations already recognize Palestine, by the way, which means the United Nations does recognize Palestine, just not formally. Formally, it would be nice, so they have the same benefits of Israel over there at the table. But don't despair. We don't really need the United Nations. The people have spoken.
Allie, are young people turning away from these structures of international law? And if so, do you see a new dawn emerging on that front?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think specifically, I mean, I've never seen so many young people tuned into a UN Security Council vote. Like young Americans in particular have been extremely critical of the United States' role in the UN. From what I've seen online, I think that there was just this like fascination coming from folks who were for the first time understanding that these international legal bodies are just like a microcosm of how the world works, right? And the US has the power to unilaterally veto a ceasefire when the vast majority of the rest of the world knows that it's needed. And so I think that like specifically the discontent is with around, as that TikToker was saying, how much power countries like the US have. And so I think that there is going to be a shift when Americans themselves are saying, why the heck does our government that doesn't even serve us, why do we have so much power on the international scale, right? So not only is our government taking advantage of its own citizens, but citizens internationally.
And George, I want to bring you in. Do you think that the fundamental balance of power in the world is being questioned in a way that maybe it wasn't in mainstream conversations previously?
Yeah, the legitimacy of the international courts and the legitimacy of the UN, I think that it's being called into question because, like it's been said before me, it's really just the imperialist buddy club. And because now we're able to see that morals and ethics and even what the rest of the global community want is not really filtered through the international court, so it can't really even be upheld by it, I think that it's going to take generations, in my opinion, for people to buy into the international court being something that can stop humanitarian crisis. Because right now it seems like we only care about humanitarian crisis and dictators when we feel like they African and when we feel like they, you know what I'm saying, coming from some country that's not cool with America and not letting American corporations do what they want to do.
Well, not all change is in the material realm. It seems some people are alluding to a more profound shift in the spiritual realm among their peers. Listen to this.
I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and in the comment section with like what's happening in Gaza, like under videos of what's happening there, there's people literally asking, where can we learn more about Islam? How do we learn more about this religion? Because these people are so patient. They have so much trust in their religion that like, we're so curious. Y'all, times are changing. Times are changing.
Yeganeh, a recent study found that most Gen Z, 77%, consider themselves spiritual. That's significantly higher than among millennials. Are we seeing a spiritual awakening alongside this political awakening, and how do you connect the two?
Yeah, I think, Gen Z is more comfortable using the word spiritual. I think a lot of people who grew up in a religious background, like they're told, don't call yourself spiritual, call yourself religious. So I think this new generation is just more comfortable using that word. But also, we're waking up to our phones and we're watching children's heads get blown off. It's kind of impossible to not, there are people who don't believe in anything, but I know for myself, I hope to look towards something and some form of hope because the world is so dire. And if there's not hope, I think, I would lose my mind. So maybe other people feel the same way.
George, is there a spiritual awakening underway? And what does that mean exactly? Is it an important component of the change?
I would say the people in power right now is real pissed off because there was a lot of money that was spent in creating anti-Muslim, anti-Arab narratives here. I would say that the entire Western world has bought into Islamophobia in a way that I feel like damn near got undone overnight. When September 9/11 happened, I think that the entire Western world bought into demonizing Arab people and specifically demonizing Islam. When we're able to see the resilience, the loyalty, the love that the Palestinians have in the face of all this craziness, it has literally forced people to have book clubs on TikTok talking about the Quran. So now people want to see for themselves. So y'all told us that the Quran say hate America. We don't see the word America in the Quran at all. You see what I'm saying? So now you got people not only picking up the Quran, learning about Allah, learning about Muhammad, you got people that's literally converting to Islam. So it's really just a lot of, to me, spiritual awakening that's happening, not only from a political standpoint, but also from a spiritual standpoint.
Well, on that note, apparently a whole generation is just now Hamas. No, it's a joke. Relax. Check this out.
And I don't think this is the beginning or the end of this generational divide or this generational shift in consciousness. Look at the Biden campaign and how much they are freaking out about the 2024 election. And this is because young Americans carried Biden in 2020. After living in Biden's America, seeing his policies on immigration, on climate, and how he's handled Israel's genocide of Palestine, we are done with him. The talking heads, the pundits, the old heads, they'll say that, if you don't vote for Biden, it's a vote for Trump. And it's like, yeah, listen, not voting for Biden increases the likelihood of Trump getting reelected. But I think you're really discounting how desperate young people in America are. But like, we don't have much to lose anymore. I mean, look at our material conditions. We can barely afford rent. We can't even dream of having a house. Forget that. You know, many of us don't have health care. Pretty much all of us live paycheck to paycheck.
Allie, with everything we've just discussed, what impact, if any, do you think this is all likely to have on the upcoming US election?
I mean, I would just love to get inside the mind of Democratic campaign leaders right now, because I don't know that I've ever seen a strategy so messy. It's genuinely kind of confusing, because I'm not sure whether it's just pure condescension towards young people when folks in the Democratic Party say, you know, too bad we're not calling for a ceasefire, but you have to vote for Biden, or, you know, too bad that the Electoral College is a problem, and, you know, we don't have ranked choice voting in the way that our system runs. Only Democrats and Republicans can win, and you don't like either of them, but too bad, you know, Trump is scarier, so you have to vote for Biden. I mean, I've always voted Democrat as long as I've been able to vote, which has not been that long in my lifetime. But I mean, it is kind of, the Democrats are running a tumultuous campaign for sure. And I think that's going to be a big problem for them. I think they're going to lose a significant amount of their voter block. They've already lost a significant amount of their voter block voting uncommitted in primaries. And I think they either aren't taking seriously enough the youth vote, or I think that they are too comfortable blaming young people for what they perceive as, you know, imagined problems, overreaction to genocide, which is crazy to say, but they're not taking the threat seriously. And I think that bodes well for Trump's election potential, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeganeh, we just heard a young man say that young people in America don't have much to lose anymore. If young white Americans feel this way, are we seeing a more generalized tipping point, which the Gaza crisis is just igniting?
Yeah, I wanted to add to Allie's point too. You know, just before October 7th, we were facing the Women Life Freedom movement, and which is still going on. And Joe Biden showed, you know, absolutely no strength in that either, continuing to give funds to the terrorist regime that runs the Islamic Republic of Iran as well. So it's kind of like all foreign policy leading up to this point hadn't been beneficial either. And so many different categories of people had been so fed up with being lied to and news being just fake all around with reporting. When it comes to the white man having nothing else to lose, I think, you know, it's also, we have to have a level of safety too, because for some people, this is the first time they're learning about Palestine or Islam and things like that, and learning the lies the West has told us. And sometimes that can go into the extreme other side as well, right? So while it's true the West lies to us, sometimes we could see at protests white people holding the flag of Hezbollah, let's say. They don't genuinely know what that flag represents or the amount of human rights that kind of flag breaks. So I think white people right now need to also consider their privilege and their standpoint. When I went to the encampments, one thing that was said all around is, you know, if you are white, especially a white man, try to put yourself as a layer of protection between the police and the people of color who are protesting. So kind of knowing their space and I'm not saying they can't be leaders, but if you learned about it just very recently, I would hope you would educate yourself further too.
Yeganeh just mentioned the encampments there, George. There'll be many hoping that this genie can be put back in the bottle. Do you think it can?
Nah. I think that it's going to have to be the long overhauls the Reagan administration figured out how to do after Kent State and trying to push back against the educated proletariat. I think right now it's too many people that's sick and tired of being sick and tired. And one thing about, you feel me, the metaphor y'all opened up with, talking about the Kool-Aid, I can acknowledge that America, England, France, and Israel has put a lot of money in putting that flavor in the Kool-Aid. But our palate has changed. It's nasty. We're going to spit it out. And because they're having a hard time coming to grips with their narrative they configured to get us to taste, it's not really hitting our stomachs the way it used to. I think it's going to be just a long overhaul, because right now, it's not hitting the way it used to just be like, well, you against Israel, so you're against Jewish people. It's not hitting the way it did 2 years ago. You being like, well, you're critical of Zionism, this means you hate. It's not hitting the same way no more. So I think that the old people that made the Kool-Aid, they having a hard time coming to grips with how can we add ingredients in this to make it more palatable. Right now, it's nasty. Everybody see it for what it is.
Well, I want to thank you, all of our guests, George, Allie, and Yeganeh. And I want to thank you all for watching. Did you enjoy the show? Talk to us on social media. Is there a conversation or topic you'd like us to cover? We want to hear about it. Get in touch using the hashtag or the handle AJStream and we will look into it. Take care and I'll see you soon.